Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn.
Doctor is teacher, so when I'm giving presentations, but also a big part of what I do with my patients is educating them not just on their illness and how the illness is manifesting in the body, but also how to utilize not just different therapies, but ways of like nutrition and management, etc. And then lastly, treating a whole person. And I definitely feel with sleep, it's really important to look at all aspects of someone. It's not just about giving someone a natural sleep aid. It's really like looking at like what are the effects affecting one sleep. So here's some of the, there's a lot of objectives. So hoping that you will understand stress and how it affects the body, how stress affects sleep. I'm going to also explain the importance of sleep, describe the science of sleep, and identifying the common causes of sleep problems, and presenting some natural strategies to get a better night's sleep and also handle your stress. So first off, what are you guys stressing about? What are some things that are causing stress in your life?
Can I say what's not causing me stress?
Sure.
That might be a quicker list.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Work.
Yeah.
Lack of sleep.
Lack of sleep is, yes, is a big stressor. Okay. So first off, like when we're talking about stress, like what are we even talking about? So basically stress is any disturbance. So we often think about stress like more from like emotional, mental state, but heat, cold, physical things, chemicals, etc. Anything that's causing some kind of like potential harm to the body that is basically causing a stress reaction. Like if we even think about like from a physics standpoint, the equation for stress is force over area. So it's like anything that's kind of like insulting into the body. And it's not so much about the stressor, it's more about how our bodies handle the stress. So there's like an ancient proverb that like if the whole world is covered in thorns, you have two options. You can either cover the world in leather or you can wear leather shoes. And I think that is a good example of like thinking about stress and how to handle stress. So here's some basic statistics about stress in America. So 1 in 5 adults reports that their stress is extreme or high. Almost 1 out of 2 adults is lying awake at night due to stress. So I think that's a big thing. Nearly 1 in 2 report that stress has had a negative impact personally or professionally. 75 to 90% of doctor's visits are actually stress related. And stress actually either causes or makes worse 90% of all illnesses. So now I want to talk a little bit about the kind of the chronic stress reaction and how many people here are familiar with the concept of like the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems? Is that something that people have heard about? So our autonomic nervous system has 2 parts. It has the sympathetic, which is our fight or flight response, and then our parasympathetic, which is our rest and digest. And I want to kind of give an example of how this works, and it's kind of a funny example. So many years ago, I was in Martinique. It's an island, it's beautiful in the Caribbean. I was really enjoying a really lovely vacation. And I get a news report that there's been a major snowstorm in New York. Now, Martinique actually only has 2 flights a week. It's not a very popular vacation destination. So because of this snowstorm, my flight was canceled and I had to spend like another 4 or 5 days. When I got the news, I was like, oh my gosh, I had patients the next day. I had all these things. I started feeling sick to my stomach. I started getting like diarrhea, like everything. I was like, oh my gosh, like I have a food allergy. What's going on with me? That is the classic stress response. Basically, my sympathetic nervous system was in overdrive, even though I was in paradise. And basically what happens when we have that initial stressor, certain neurochemicals start firing in our bodies, basically preparing us for back in like prehistoric times when we were fighting off danger. So what is it doing? It's basically taking the blood from this area of our body and basically shunning it to our limbs so that we can run. It increases our heart rate, increases our breath. And the other thing of why did I have like such bad stomach reaction is because again, all the blood is basically shunted away from the digestion. So again, like when we think about parasympathetic is our rest and digest, and our sympathetic is our flight or fight. So the 2 main chemicals that are coming into play during that stress reaction are cortisol and adrenaline, both norepinephrine and epinephrine. So having these stress reactions time and again, it's not going to be a problem. And this is more what we call the acute. Now, if that stressor doesn't go away and we have not developed proper habits to help reduce the effect of stress in our body, then we're going into this territory, which is the resistance reaction. So cortisol is continuously being released. And at that point, it's now becoming more problematic. That's when you're going to be having high blood pressure. Cortisol also has an impact on blood sugar and insulin. We might have heard of insulin resistance. So that's when we're in this resistance phase. Now, there's only so much that our body can really pump out. So at some point, we reach this level of exhaustion. And how many people have heard of adrenal fatigue? Is that something that people have heard of? And so adrenal fatigue is when we have been so stressed, we're not able to cope from it. And basically what happens is we deplete our sodium, and instead of having high blood pressure, we end up having low blood pressure. It also can cause sleep issues, difficulty functioning, affects our immune system. Sure. So the 2 big ones are cortisol and our adrenaline hormones. So that's things like norepinephrine and epinephrine. And they're basically, our adrenal glands are these glands that are right above our kidneys. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit more about cortisol. How many have people heard of cortisol before? And how many people think cortisol is bad? It's okay. You don't have to answer that. So cortisol definitely gets like a bad rap, but we actually do need cortisol. We actually do need these stress processes, and cortisol does, when it's operating properly, does help with our immune system. It definitely helps with blood sugar regulation. It helps with inflammation, and we actually even have a cortisol rhythm. But again, the big problem is when we are excessively releasing cortisol, specifically when we don't need it and all the time. And that's again where you can be leading to more chronic disease such as diabetes, high blood pressure, fertility problems. It can lead to a lot of problems. But again, we do need cortisol, but not in extreme doses. Okay, so how do we know we're stressed? So as I mentioned before, when I was in Martinique and I had like that digestion problem, that was completely a stress issue. When we're having difficulty sleeping, difficulty thinking, headaches, skin problems. So we actually have, we produce sebum, which is the oil that can lead to acne. And we actually have receptors on for our stress hormones that actually can increase sebum and can like lead to acne. And here are some of the conditions that are linked to stress, and specifically chronic stress. So autoimmune diseases, that's huge. So studies actually have shown that people that have had at least 2 or more traumatic childhood events have a greater likelihood of actually developing autoimmune conditions. And I actually see this a lot in my practice. I have like 2 specific cases. So I had this one woman who had crippling arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. I did a lot of things with her, but one of the big things that we did work on was stress. She's a very complicated woman. She ran her own company. She had a very weird, strange, like marital relationship. So she had a lot of stress. And the amazing thing about this woman was she was not a spiritual woman by any means, but she herself realized the connection between her flares of arthritis and her stress. And her way of actually conquering the stress was she just realized it wasn't even worth it. And that really, really helped eliminate her flares.
I know.
Huh?
So simple.
I know it sounds so simple, but for her, like she's just like, I just can't. She's like, it's not worth it. She knew that it would cause her crippling disease, and it was like not worth it to her. Depression. So the prolonged stress actually does affect our brains. It actually causes certain parts of our brains to be more atrophied. So like less, so basically like our prefrontal cortex, which really helps with our ability to make good decisions. Prolonged stress affects that part of the brain. And then are people familiar with like the amygdala? So that part gets more activated, and that's going to be causing again issues like around depression, anxiety. Really important, our cycle. So stress has so we have our HPA axis, which is our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which gets triggered during times of stress. But we also have a hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, which basically talks to our ovaries that help our cycle. And during prolonged periods of stress, that part does not get as activated as the HPA axis is activated, and that can really throw off ovulation, throw off hormones. And are people familiar with PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome? So this condition we often think about more like insulin and blood sugar, but there is a type of PCOS that is very much affected by stress. We call it adrenal androgen excess PCOS. And basically our adrenal glands, I know I talked about cortisol and I talked about norepinephrine and epinephrine, but they also produce another type of hormone called DHEAS, which has very potent androgen or male-like hormone properties and is also a precursor for testosterone. And I'm actually seeing more and more women with that kind of PCOS more so than the insulin resistant PCOS. So stress is really can impact us a lot. Okay, so now more about how stress actually influences sleep. So again, we talked about cortisol and adrenaline. These all heighten arousal, plus they also have a big influence on blood sugar. So blood sugar dysregulation can impact both our ability to fall asleep and also maintain sleep. Now, sleep deprivation in itself also impacts our ability when it comes to stress. It actually causes more cortisol. So you can see that there can be this vicious cycle, unfortunately. The other thing too, when it comes to stress, what are some of the things that we unfortunately might do when we're stressed out, but we reach towards sugar, we reach towards maybe alcohol, caffeine, a lot of these things that are disruptors of sleep. So stress can be, they really do go hand in hand. And it's something that I always consider whenever I have a patient come in to see me with sleep issues. Stress is always something that we need to be discussing. Okay, so now more about the importance. Let me just go make sure I'm back on. So why is sleep important, and like why do we need to sleep? And sleep is really the time of day where we do a lot of repair. And that's why a lot of these different conditions and these different systems are impacted specifically if we are not sleeping. So skin aging. So one of the big things happening during sleep is we are repairing our collagen, plus also our water balance. And so these can all show up in skin. That's why they call it like beauty rest. Similarly, when it comes to like wound healing and muscle recovery, all these different processes are actually happening when we're sleeping. Our immune function, so our immune function suffers greatly when we are not sleeping properly. Healthy weight maintenance. So we actually have certain hormones that are influenced by sleep. So one is ghrelin and one is leptin, and these have they basically tell us when we're hungry, when we're not, when we're satiated, and if we're not sleeping well, that can be thrown off. And also, so basically all these different aspects are really important when it comes to, or sleep is very important. Okay, so how much sleep do we need? So the amount of sleep that we need varies from age, though the way we sleep is a bit different. So I don't know, is Michal and I the only ones who have kids, I think, right? Oh, you have a child. Okay. So babies don't necessarily, so yes, they need 14 to 17 hours, but they're not getting that in a full stretch. And most adults, on the other hand, we tend to, in an ideal world, are sleeping through the night. Now, seniors, on the other hand, kind of similar to babies, they sleep less at night and they often will need a nap. The other interesting thing about, and I'll talk about this more when we get to the sleep cycles, is babies actually spend half of their sleep time in REM sleep. So are people familiar with that term, REM sleep? So rapid eye movement, which is where we're dreaming, versus seniors, on the other hand, REM sleep becomes, so as we age, REM sleep becomes less, and also the deeper stages of sleep become less. Okay, so now I want to talk, how many people have heard of the circadian rhythm?
Is that the Chinese clock? No.
There is a Chinese clock, and that's actually really interesting. That's not about this, but I know what you're talking about. The Chinese clock, I don't do Chinese medicine, but there is a clock that is dedicated towards like each like body region. And like, for example, like if you wake up at a certain time, it can indicate like liver or small intestine. But that's a different clock.
Are you able to zoom in?
Huh?
Are you able to zoom in at all?
Oh. So when we're talking about the circadian rhythm, we're talking about our body clock as far as its sleep-wake cycle. It's governed by our pineal gland in our brain, and it secretes a hormone called melatonin, which you probably might have heard of. Melatonin is very much influenced by light. Now, what's interesting is we often associate the circadian rhythm as being a 24-hour, but this actually is because it's of the influence of light. In fact, studies have shown when people are deprived light, it's actually more of like a 25-hour, which is kind of interesting. Now, we can also influence our circadian rhythm by not just by light, but other factors, which we call Zeitgebers. And so this can be influenced by food, it can be influenced by certain activity. And when I get further into the presentation, it will make more sense as far as the importance of like daily routines and how that can.
What are we looking
Oh, so this is the circadian rhythm. So basically this kind of shows you at different times what different bodily processes are happening. And again, we're mostly, so there's ideally supposed to be happening. Ideally supposed to be happening. And there's many other, so we're really focusing on the sleep aspect of the circadian rhythm, but there's other parts. And so the other things that things also to take note, I guess, like, you know, thinking about the circadian rhythm and the importance of melatonin and sleep onset. So melatonin secretion is blunted or blocked by blue light. And are people kind of maybe have heard of like blue light glasses or that kind of, so when it comes to optimal sleep, we really need to be avoiding blue light a minimum of 2 hours prior to our desired sleep time.
Minimum.
A minimum, because of that blue light secretion.
Cell phones,
from desire?
laptops.
Right. Huh?
From the time that you want to sleep.
Yes, and there are some like hacks. So you could get like blue light glasses. Most devices have like the night shift. So I have like on all my devices at home, I set them preset to the night shift. So I can use my device without having the blue light. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about, you know, I'll save it for when I get, I'm gonna talk about there, I could talk more about that one. Okay, so here's the sleep cycles. And so they're, so a couple of things about the sleep cycles. So basically, stage 1 and stage 2, this is our less deep forms of sleep. Not a lot is really happening in these stages. It's basically preparing ourselves for the deeper stages. And it's really the deep stages that we're having memory consolidation. We're having like all of our repair from muscles, skin, etc. This is like what's going to be really helping with like our immune function. You know, a couple things I guess like about the lighter stages. So sometimes we think about like, you know, oh, I wake up in the middle of the night. So we actually all technically do, but some of us are not aware of it. So if you're not aware of it, that's more ideal. The problem is more when you wake up and then can't fall back to sleep. As the night progresses, our deeper stages stop and our REM sleep becomes longer. So some other important things to note about the sleep cycle specifically, again, because
I thought REM was deep sleep, not deep sleep.
it is deep sleep. I know this is where it's fine. I wish I could find I mean, all the sleep graphs look like this, and I know it gets really confusing. So REM is deep sleep, but it looks like as if it's not deep sleep. It is definitely deep sleep. It's really, that's really important part of, again, like we're consolidation of thoughts, consolidation of memory. Now, some important things to note. So again, stage 3, stage 4, REM, these are really the most important parts of sleep. In fact, I mean, if I was going to say, sometimes it's not so much about like the quantity, but the quality. So these are really what's going to be indicating. Yes, so stage 3 and stage 4 are all deep sleep. So a couple things, probably no one's a smoker here. Probably not. I feel like nobody really smokes anymore, but if you did, I would say another reason not, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people smoking, but I was just thinking, nobody in this room. So besides getting like lung cancer and heart disease, nicotine actually robs us of our deep sleep. So it's like another reason. If you needed another reason not to smoke, that's one reason.
I'll work on it.
Okay. So another robber of deep sleep is actually alcohol. So yes, we might think that like alcohol relaxes us, makes us feel more restful, but it actually really negatively impacts our sleep. One of the big things with alcohol too is that it actually increases cortisol levels, and that's one of the reasons why maybe you'll have a couple glasses of wine, you feel really tired, you go to bed, and then you're kind of like up all night long. Alcohol also really not great for sleep. Now, what's even more interesting when we're thinking again about like quality of sleep, a lot of our sleep medications actually just make us feel asleep, but they're actually really robbing us of these deeper stages of sleep. So benzodiazepines, things like Klonopin, Valium, they decrease stages 3, 4, and REM sleep.
Just taking away like some of the anxiety from not sleeping, but they're not actually letting them recharge properly.
Exactly. Because what's the point of, because like, as I mentioned before, like the importance of sleep, the importance of sleep is the repair. So if we're not repairing, are we really sleeping? Or like, are we really getting the benefit from sleep? Similarly, Ambien also, that's one of the problems with Ambien. Like we might have heard of these like these news stories of people like taking Ambien and then like finding themselves in their car driving. And a big part of that is because, again, they're not getting stage 3, stage 4.
That's
Give
so
us
scary.
context.
What do you
Yeah,
got?
they took medication and they started, they thought they fell asleep, then they like stopped walking their car.
Yeah, you haven't heard about that? Yeah,
Okay,
it's a
I
problem.
know someone like that.
Yeah.
She didn't realize it until after told her. Like,
Yeah.
I talked to her, she was totally functioning, and then the next day she had no memory, no concept.
Right.
What were the other medications that you said?
So the first one is benzodiazepines. So these are things like Klonopin, Valium, Ativan. They're also very hard to come off of. Trazodone, which is not a benzo, it's actually an SSRI. That does increase stages 3 and 4, but on the other hand, it actually robs us of our REM sleep. So again, thinking about cognition, the cognitive benefits of sleep. So again, you're not going to be getting so much of it. And now the other would be antihistamines, things like Benadryl. They actually tend to increase stage 3 and 4. So maybe that's debatable whether or not that actually could still be beneficial. I have a special slide about melatonin, so I'm gonna save that for. Okay, so here's just like more on the sleep cycle. Okay, so here are some of the types of insomnia. So first would be sleep onset. And so sleep onset definitely could be due to stress and anxiety. Other big thing is, like, as I mentioned before, blue light being on our devices, that is definitely going to be affecting sleep onset. Different chemicals, also our hormones. So I don't know if anyone has noticed either certain times of the month that they might have more sleep issues. A big factor could actually be estrogen. So estrogen at certain parts of our cycle is higher, and that can have an impact on melatonin. And I'll talk more about that when I get to melatonin. So that's during the follicular phase. So during the follicular phase, our estrogen goes up to eventually trigger ovulation. So some women also can experience sleep disturbances. It's interesting. So you can have sleep disturbances at the first half of your cycle because of the way estrogen relates to melatonin, and it also being what we call like more of like a neurostimulating hormone, versus at the second half of our cycle, which is governed more by progesterone. You could also have sleep issues because progesterone can increase core body temperature. So it's kind of interesting, both depending how your body works. So sleep maintenance. So I'd say actually sleep maintenance would be more of an issue potentially during the luteal phase of our cycle, the second half of the cycle. But the big thing with sleep maintenance, definitely, at least I find in my practice, it's usually always stress related, and that has a lot to do with cortisol spiking at night. The other thing with sleep maintenance, often it can also be blood sugar and insulin related. Then, early morning awakening, that typically is mostly associated with age.
I thought that was all sleep onset.
Oh, so sorry, sleep onset meaning taking a long time to sleep. So like typically we would say any.
You can't fall asleep.
Exactly. Sorry. So basically we would say like if it takes you longer than 30 minutes to fall asleep.
30 minutes. Oh, 30. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, like consistently. And then mixed, where again, like you have a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, you wake too early.
So all of these are all compensating things.
So I'd say stress would probably be the leading cause of almost all those things, but there can be a lot of other factors of why someone might have, and the other big thing could also be chronic pain. Another problem with sleep maintenance can be allergies, and that's one of the reasons why like antihistamines can be, for some people, can be an effective sleep aid. Okay, so here's some of the conditions that are associated with sleep problems. So this kind of mix, it's both, some of these conditions can cause sleep problems, but also some of these conditions are caused by sleep problems. Okay, so here, probably this is going to be more useful, is the strategies for a better night's sleep. Okay, so exercise. So exercise is great, but I'll have to say that exercise, it's very time dependent. So stress is definitely, exercise is definitely going to be helping with stress, but the interesting thing is that exercise is also a stress inducer, depending on what type of exercise. So as I mentioned before, we have a cortisol rhythm. Our cortisol is naturally higher at the beginning of the day. And that's actually one of the things that wakes us up in the morning. We actually want cortisol. And so if we're going to be engaging in high impact exercise, it's more beneficial to do that at the earlier part of the day for two reasons. One, as I mentioned before, the cortisol, but two, also core body temperature. So in another slide, I'll talk about the importance of core body temperature, but we really want our core body temperature lower at night, because that's actually better for sleep. And then besides just cortisol that gets released during exercise, but we also think about, like, again, our adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine. So if we're engaging in high impact exercise, want to do that earlier part of the day.
And
Now,
that will help you sleep at night.
yeah. So I have another slide about this, but really what we do during the day really impacts how we sleep at night. And I think Mikhail might be able to also kind of chime in about this, but we put so much emphasis on our child's schedule. Like I remember, like I was not ready to like hand my baby off to like a sitter until like I knew their schedule, because their schedule really impacts their sleep. Well, guess what? It still is true even as we are adults. So then the other, though, with exercise, so other types of exercise, things that are much more relaxation, things like very low impact yoga, Pilates, stretching, that actually can be really beneficial later in the day towards bedtime. Specifically, I just was actually talking to a patient of mine earlier today who actually has some sleep problems, and she was like asking me about routine. One of the most important muscle groups that we can be really working on for better sleep is actually our quads. One of the problems is that most of us sit all day. And so any kind of stretching that we can do to really release the quads, like there's a pose in yoga called a hero's pose. Is anyone familiar with that pose? but it's, I mean, I'm not going to demo it, but like anything that's going to be, it's not very super complicated, but anything that's going to really get into the quads is going to be really beneficial for sleep.
Lymphatic, like stimulation.
Yeah, that would be really good
That's
too.
For like morning or evening, it doesn't matter.
Both, like doing the brushing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good for either. Yeah.
What about walking at night?
Walking at night should be fine. I guess it depends, like, you know, what kind of walking, like how late, and everybody's body also, I think, is like different. If walking, you feel calm, you feel relaxed, you're not tense in your body, I think that would be fine.
The quad stretching before tonight.
Yeah, so that would definitely be a good thing to do before bed. Anything really kind of like getting into the legs, also like the iliopsoas muscle, like any, like this region here, that tends to be a good idea. And you can also do, like, you can also like combine it with like an Epsom salt bath. Now we learned in naturopathic school, I don't know, I was never that I think my, wait, did my, I think the slides must, oh yeah, that was, oh, it's fine. This is like the other version, but that's fine. Okay. So go to, okay, so Huh? I think it's fine, or I think it's fine. I can do the, I don't think it matters so much the order, but okay, so basically most of, like, I feel like the dietary principles both for stress and sleep should be kind of relatively intuitive, of balanced eating. A big, specifically when it comes to sleep, really a big emphasis should be on protein, with the goal in mind of at least like 20 grams of protein at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Good sources of complex carbohydrates. So I always recommend with my patients, when you're choosing carbohydrates, at least 2 grams of fiber per serving. But what's even more important than, you know, obviously all this stuff is also like the timing of meals and like what we choose to eat and what we choose to when. So when it comes to both sleep and stress, it's actually more advantageous to have your larger meals being breakfast and lunch, and then dinner should be a lighter meal with easier to digest carbohydrate, easier to digest protein. And when I get to the next one of the slides, so are people familiar with tryptophan, maybe? So tryptophan is an amino acid, and I will talk about it again. So maybe I'll save that for later. But what I did want to talk about tryptophan is that it is an amino acid that does help with support, but it actually tends to work better when it is combined with carbohydrate. And that's another reason why at our last meal that we want to have some carbohydrate to really activate tryptophan. Now, for some of us that might get a little bit hungry, like later in the night, and we really want to snack, you know, having some light protein like nuts, maybe like a hard-boiled egg. And that's another concept too, is that if you find, some people will have this tendency of waking up in the middle of the night hungry. If that is the case with you, a good idea again would be to have like maybe some nuts stashed like next to your bed, and just like having a few if like you wake up and you feel hungry. I wanted to highlight some like beneficial foods when it comes to sleep. Who here has heard of tart cherry juice? So the reason tart cherry juice can help specifically before bed, it has properties that can help to stimulate melatonin. Other beneficial foods are walnuts, kiwis, and pistachios, and all these have a benefit on both melatonin and tryptophan. Okay, so now what to avoid. So here are the sleep disruptors. And that's, again, one of the things we think about too, like with stress, is again, we sometimes have a tendency of reaching towards these types of foods. So first I want to talk about caffeine. So I'm not saying that you cannot have caffeine, but you definitely want to be very mindful of when you have caffeine, really knowing your body, and also like knowing like hidden sources of caffeine. I know we probably already know that coffee, black tea, green tea, although sometimes people don't. I have had many patients that were so surprised to hear that green tea has caffeine, but also chocolate has caffeine. Many of our sodas have caffeine. So it's important to understand some of the hidden sources. Now, how caffeine actually affects sleep is actually very interesting. So there is this concept of sleep pressure. So sleep pressure, so again, we'll talk a little bit more about melatonin later, but I want to talk about sleep pressure. So as the day progresses, our body starts basically, I mean, I'm trying to think of like make this, at least I'm just going to say, we start building up this chemical in our body called adenosine. And it basically comes from an energy molecule, ATP. So as this adenosine increases in our body, we actually start getting tired. Now, caffeine actually blocks adenosine. That's how caffeine works. So you can see that if you're having caffeine later in the day, you're basically continuously blocking up adenosine and you're lowering your sleep pressure. Now, all of us have different abilities to metabolize caffeine. And one of the very fascinating things is that our bodies actually process, oh, it's like I forgot another theory. Our bodies actually process estrogen via the same cytochrome, which is cytochromes are just things that basically break down different substances in our body, is also breaks down caffeine. So some of us might actually be more susceptible to being more stimulated by caffeine during certain times of the month when our estrogen is higher, or if we're on birth control pills, or maybe we're doing some kind of hormone replacement therapy, or maybe we're doing any kind of like egg freezing, or any time where we're specifically more of these synthetic forms of the hormones. So that's just something. Alcohol, as I mentioned before, affects stage 3 and stage 4, and then refined carbohydrates and sugar are definitely going to be disrupting our sleep. And then lastly, this woman here talking about like, again, like the blue light and how, I mean, I find like the screens, that's like a big one that can be a big game changer really when it comes to sleep.
Do regular lights have blue light?
Most of them do. So yeah, so again, you have to be very, very mindful of light usage before bed. And so like, you know, turning down lights, utilizing things like blue light glasses can really make a big difference.
I think it's also the stimulation of what you're watching, what you're doing.
Right, there's that too. There's like so many things, what they call it, like doom scrolling or something like that. So when I'm talking about building a routine, yes, I think having, because it's the same patient I was talking about with like the quad stretching, like she was asking me about like a sleep routine. And I think all of us should have some sort of unwinding ritual. Like you can't go from going to a crazy Februarian party and then thinking you can go to sleep. Like you need to have something to unwind. And I feel like that's very particular to everyone. Like some people it's reading a book, some people it's taking a bath, stretching, etc. So that's just like a sleep routine. But we as humans need our like daily routine. As I mentioned before, infants tend to sleep better when they have a routine. Usually I mean, there could be other issues why the infant's not sleeping, but a big part could be that they don't have a routine yet. Right, exactly. So our routine, so I always like to tell my patients, like our bodies actually really want us to be as boring as possible. They really would love like go to bed the same time, you wake at the same time, you exercise at the same time, you eat relatively at the same time. But basically our daily activities really can impact our sleep. And so getting into good habits and building in a routine. Okay, so this slide was going to be earlier, but it's there. It's there. So I think this should be obvious, calming the mind and body. And really whatever type of mind-body practice you decide works for you, consistency is really the most important thing. really devoting anywhere from like 1 to 10 minutes daily of some sort of mindfulness activity. Because mindfulness, so when I'm talking about mindfulness, what am I talking about? I'm talking about things like meditation, breath work, yoga, tai chi, whatever kind of. So these are kind of like the ones that we, and I'll talk also about some other concepts that I use with some of my patients. But really, it's getting into that consistent practice, because these practices actually are more almost as a preventative. There's a couple breath techniques that I use with my patients, and I'll tell them that to really get the benefit, you need to be doing this on a daily basis, not when that anxiety, so you can use it when anxiety happens or stress happens, but if you haven't really gotten into that practice, it's actually almost going to be more stressful trying to do the practice than if you had been practicing it. So how these, if we would just want to talk about meditation, we just want to talk about breath work for a second. Maybe I'll just focus on breath work. So most breath techniques, what they're really trying to do is they're really trying to elongate our exhalation versus, and in comparison with our inhalation. Why do we do that? Is, as I mentioned before, the parasympathetic is our rest and digest. So if our exhalations are longer, we're actually putting our bodies into the parasympathetic. So whether it's like you might have like done, like, I don't know if anyone's done a yoga class, because often they might do some of these different breath techniques where you might start with like an inhale and exhale and on the count of 1, and then like you like add more to the exhalation. So that's just one example of how we can elongate the exhalation. Now, some other ways that we can also calm the mind and body that are a little bit different. So one is doing a body scan. And so that can be something that we can work into our night routine. So kind of like focusing on a certain part of the body. There's like, you can probably find like a YouTube or, right. And then there's also progressive muscle relaxation, where you like tense the part and then you release it. So those are some things that you can definitely do. Yeah, yeah. And then there's another technique. There's who here is familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT? So there is actually like a whole like CBTI module, and there's a couple pretty good apps if you're not wanting to see a practitioner. But there's 2 other things within the CBT. You can't use it. Right. That's true. It's very true. But
Started 2 hours.
So within like the CBT, I guess like umbrella of things that they might recommend it. So one of the things that one can do, like specifically, there's more things that we would do during the day, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend these before bed, but they could actually help in the long run. So one is like identifying like automatic thoughts and cognitive distortions, and you can actually Google that one. And so that's as like, during the day, if something bothers us, and we can kind of write down like our automatic thought and like what they call like a cognitive distortion. It's like what catastrophic thinking or black and white thinking, all these kinds of things. You can definitely look that up. That's one thing you can do. The other thing that is kind of interesting is this concept of predictable scheduled worry time. It's funny, but this is actually a thing. So it's setting aside anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, and you can either write or you can just think about these things that are bothering you, and you set that time in your schedule that day. And it really only works, again, we're talking about consistency. Why, if you get into that consistent practice, is if you are one of these people that is like thinking about like all the things they have to do the next day, or they're worrying about things at night, which is not the best time, right? Because that's when we want to sleep. If you've gotten into that habit, the funny thing that'll happen, you'll be like, wait, I get to do that tomorrow. I get to do that during worry time. I get to worry about that.
What I need to remember tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
Write it. That's the trick.
Yeah.
So no, you write it,
But you don't write it then.
but you do, and then you will fall asleep. Because it's like, okay, it's already on the paper, I'll live it tomorrow.
Right. And then
It's
there's,
actually, there's
yeah.
there's a class from She's Help many years ago about Tanya and how Tanya teaches this method.
right.
That when a Yitzhar comes and it's bothering you and worrying you, set a time and make a date with it.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny, like I feel like all these like kind of more modern things, it almost always comes back to Tanya.
Tanya,
It's really
yes.
funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so here's, well, there's another
It's an hour before.
Yeah.
Now I'm supposed to see.
and then there's like another concept of like they call it gosh, it's I don't know, it's like dialing down. It's this, I can't remember the name, but it is like this like process of like kind of doing a couple of like kind of like a little bit of like planning your day the next day. But it's something, it's like not a downloading ritual. It's I can't remember the name of it now, but it's also like another thing that, again, your mind body doesn't have to be like all about, there's other things that you can be doing. Okay, so establishing the environment, and this also might be kind of obvious, so definitely want to keep it dark. And the main reason we want to keep it dark is because we want melatonin to be optimal at night. Cool. So this is actually really important that we do want to bring down our core body temperature.
Any heat, like the round bump.
Someone I know doesn't put on the heat.
I actually finally figured out how to turn the heat off in my apartment. But the thing is, I have to do it after my husband has fallen asleep because he thinks that the heat should be on.
Right.
So I wait until he falls asleep and I turn off the heat. So yeah, so about 65 to 70 degrees for adults, and it's a little bit warmer for infants. So it has to, yeah, so keeping it cool, clean, kind of like from like a feng shui perspective. The other important thing is that we really want to make sure that our bedrooms, our beds really are kind of just for sleep and sex too. But that's a whole other, that's a whole intimacy. Maybe I should just change it. Yeah. So we really want to, yeah, I mean, that's like kind of the complex role that we live in as New Yorkers. We have other people living with us. Some of us live in studios. I mean, you do the best you can, but ideally you really want to try to keep your bedroom, your bed, just places that, and this is kind of also back to the whole CBT model. And I didn't really talk about sleep efficiency versus, but one of the things about the CBT model is really deepening that association of sleep with our bed and bedroom, and that we really should be not spending any time in there if we're not really sleeping. Okay, so here's some of the natural sleep aids. Okay, so in my practice, I tend to use a lot of amino acids. So amino acids basically are compounds that come from proteins. And a big thing that a lot of these amino acids, they serve as precursors to specific neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters are just chemical messengers doing cognitive things in our brain. And we have excitatory neurotransmitters that we want when we want a lot of energy. And then we have, it's like uppers and downers. So those are the uppers, and then the downers are inhibitory neurotransmitters, which are ones that we want definitely be activating when we need to be resting and when we need to be sleep. So tryptophan, we might have heard of, and then 5-HTP, which is just basically more of an activated tryptophan. Tryptophan serves as a precursor for serotonin. Serotonin is kind of an interesting neurotransmitter, as it can be both an upper and downer, but also it also is a precursor for melatonin, and it can really help with both sleep onset and sleep maintenance. GABA, so GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. This is GABA, or when we think about alcohol and benzodiazepines, which are things that make us feel more tired or more calm. And the reason that those the medication or the substance work is because they actually activate our GABA receptors. So we can take GABA for like a sense of feeling calm. And GABA actually really works really well when it's combined with L-theanine. So L-theanine is amino acid, actually comes from green tea, which is kind of interesting, or tea, which again, we think of tea as a stimulant, but it has this other amino acid. Yes, you can get all these in supplement form. Oh, but I wanted to talk especially about glycine in the middle of, in a special way that I was reminded of how you could get that one. So yeah, so all these you can definitely get in supplement form. I would all these I would definitely recommend taking before bed. Amino acids should in general be taken away from food, mostly because when you're trying to target a specific amino acid, you don't want it to compete with other amino acids unless like you're kind of like L-theanine definitely works really well together with GABA, but again, that you don't want them kind of like competing. So L-theanine, really great for sleep onset, sleep maintenance. Phosphatidylserine. So phosphatidylserine is probably my favorite amino acid. So it's well, serine is the actual amino acid. It's connected to a phosphatidyl group. So this really does a great job at helping with cortisol. It also helps with cognitive function. And then there's a lot of really interesting studies with phosphatidylserine and longevity. It's actually really just a great amino acid. I feel like everyone should take it. I don't think there's too many contraindications. Oh, but I forgot. So tryptophan and 5-HTP, they're completely contraindicated if you are taking an antidepressant or an SSRI. The reason is that it can increase serotonin too much, and actually too much serotonin causes something called serotonin syndrome, and that's like a hot Hatzalikal.
Wait, which one?
Tryptophan or 5-HTP. So don't take that if you're on an SSRI, or like don't, or at least tell your psychiatrist and maybe you can work something out. Glycine. So glycine both helps with sleep onset and sleep maintenance. Now we were talking about supplementation. Now, interestingly, is that glycine is actually very high in gelatin. So gelatin actually could be a beneficial food for sleep maintenance. Obviously, kosher gelatin, which they have. And the way that I would recommend if you're going to utilize gelatin for sleep is actually taking it in like the late afternoon. It tends to work better. Glycine is also very high in chicken skin. So if you like crispy chicken skin, that's a really good source of glycine.
We see that somebody will take it in the afternoon and then eat it.
Yeah, so you could have
make space between lunch and dinner, somewhere in the middle, take it.
Well, so the gelatin just seems to work. I guess like the way the glycine breaks down in the gelatin and the time it takes, it's best just to do it like late afternoon. It takes like about like 4 to 5 hours to have like that effect. So that's usually best taken then.
Does it make you tired? Like, what does it do?
So it really helps with sleep maintenance. That's like the big one.
So basically it makes your sleep more effective.
Right, so it gives you deeper sleep. So again,
Which
glycine. So most of these, so glycine, phosphatidylserine, again, it really depends also like what is the sleep issue. So if like sleep is definitely stress related, phosphatidylserine is really your friend. And also I'd say with a combination of L-theanine.
what foods is it found in?
So this is one of those things where, yeah, I mean, really to get like a therapeutic dose, only glycine, I would say like getting it from gelatin, you could get a therapeutic dose. These others you're not going to really find in food. So here are some specific nutrients that are both beneficial for sleep and stress. So my favorites for sure are definitely magnesium. Magnesium, and there's different forms of magnesium. So magnesium glycinate, very good for like anything like mental cognition, and also what's beneficial about magnesium glycinate is it doesn't have any impact on the GI tract. So for someone who is having issues in that area, that might be good. But then if you are more on the constipated side, combining that with like magnesium citrate, oxide, and then magnesium malate is really good for muscle. So often I'll usually recommend kind of a combination of those. Now, vitamin B6, why that helps with sleep is that really helps with especially in conjunction with tryptophan, as this is really going to help with serotonin and really also making sure that the serotonin is going through the blood-brain barrier. And then pantothenic acid, zinc, potassium, these are all really important for adrenal support. Again, we're thinking about stress. There's been really good studies with omega-3 fatty acids and sleep and showing the importance of, so this is things like fish oils, there's also vegan ones, both EPA and specifically DHA. That's why one of the things we take if we are pregnant is DHA, because it's very supportive for the brain. And then iron is sort of an interesting one. I put iron here, and the reason I put iron here is, has anyone heard of restless leg syndrome?
Yeah, restless leg.
So one of the #1 causes of restless legs is actually iron deficiency.
What is
So it's like, I've heard people kind of say it's like as if like ants are like crawling up your legs all night long.
So it's like
Yes, yeah. So it's very, very much often linked. Yeah, yeah. So it's very often linked to iron deficiency. Okay, so now, of course, everyone was asking about melatonin. So a couple of things about melatonin. So melatonin is a hormone that is secreted from the pineal gland in relationship to light. And as I said before, blue light blocks its secretion. And it's basically the signaling, one of the signaling molecules of sleep. So one of the things, I don't often actually prescribe melatonin, and I'll tell you why. So I do recommend melatonin for jet lag. It can be very effective, or the other, what we call it, like social jet lag, when maybe you stay up really late on the weekends and then like trying to like basically reset your clock. The reason that I don't recommend it per se as like an everyday sleep aid is it does affect our hormones, and that can sometimes be a good thing and sometimes it can be a bad thing. So melatonin has an antagonistic relationship to estrogen, so it actually brings down estrogen, and it has an agonistic relationship with progesterone. So that could be, sometimes that could be a desirable effect. So I will sometimes actually prescribe melatonin for like patients with fibroids or breast cancer. It does also have pretty good antioxidant properties, so it can also be helpful for fertility, specifically women who are older and might be suffering from like poor eye quality. But in general, it's not something that I typically recommend as just like a all the time sleep aid. The other thing is some of the dosages that you might see in the drugstore, I think, are way too high. Most people really, to get the therapeutic dose, really only need like 1/2 to 3 milligrams. But I mean, I'll have patients sometimes like taking 10, and that's way too high. From, again, like a different therapeutic, when it comes to breast cancer, for example, we might actually recommend as high as 20 milligrams to really drive down estrogen. But it can be, again, it can be very effective specifically for jet lag. I have actually a really good jet lag protocol utilizing melatonin, but it's not necessarily something that I recommend all the time. And one of the reasons why our melatonin might not be quote unquote operating properly is probably because of the blue light or other kinds of habits. Another important thing also, if we're thinking about melatonin secretion, is also getting sunlight early in the day can also help with secretion later. Okay, so here are some herbs. So in my practice in general, I actually don't use a lot of herbs for sleep. One of the things, herbs can be very effective, but I find that most herbs are really good as like almost like I'd say like almost like a one-off solution. They don't tend, and maybe because most of my patient population are coming to see me because they have chronic insomnia. But if you wanted to take a formula with some of these, so I'll highlight a few ones. So poppy, which actually has a little bit of like it's actually where we get opiates from, but it has an effect on GABA, so that's one of the reasons why it works. And I also find too with sleep, it has most of these all act on GABA. It's good. I mean, it's good. Well, it depends what you want with GABA. If you're wanting GABA for sleep, it's good. If you didn't want GABA for sleep, then it's not so good. So most of these act on GABA. What did I want to, and then valerian acts much more on serotonin. So again, if we're thinking about things that might be contraindicated, you might want to be careful taking valerian if you are on SSRI. So we've got to be careful with herbs. Also, the other most important thing I think also with sleep herbs I find is taking a blend, and you also want to consider high quality. Often when I have a patient saying like, oh, this herb didn't work for me, it's probably usually because the quality wasn't very good. Okay, and then lastly, I think we're almost done. Okay, so adaptogens. So adaptogens are I feel like these are really popular right now, so I think people might have heard of these. So adaptogens, how do they help us sleep? I would not necessarily, most adaptogens I wouldn't take before bed, but they can help us sleep in an indirect way because of the way that they can help with stress in the body by supporting the adrenal glands. Really, only one of these adaptogens would be helpful if you took it at night. I would not take any of these other ones before, at least on this list. One that's not on here is Romania, which I think would be good with for bedtime. But so ashwagandha, which I think is also very popular right now, and we've all heard about that. So the way that ashwagandha works is it lowers cortisol. The one thing to note about ashwagandha, I know it's like really popular and it is on my list and I do prescribe it a lot. I don't usually like to prescribe it for women with PCOS, and I'll tell you why. Ashwagandha actually can increase testosterone. So in somebody who already has a testosterone problem, so I'll usually maybe do, which actually is not on this list, I usually will prescribe like rhodiola, Romania, as I mentioned before. So just something to be aware of. And yeah, so these definitely would be better. Most of these would be better during the day, but they could have an indirect impact in improving sleep by supporting the adrenal glands. Okay, so it was a lot of information. I also have, if people are interested, they can email me, or I think I have cards, but I have, if you wanted to hear even more about sleep, I have a 5-part video series where I even go, you thought this was not enough information and you needed more information, I would highly recommend signing up for the free series.
Wow. It's on your website?
Yes, or you can, it's on my website, or if you give me, or you can also, email me and I'll send you the link so you can just have quick, easy access.
Oh, thank you very much. Can we turn on the blue light? Can we turn?
I have a question. What's the suggestion around sleep tonight?
Oh, we haven't, that was at the beginning.
What was the question?
How much?
But I will say too, that there are, it's not the majority of the people, but there are some people that are, oh, wow. So yes, from most of the people in this age group, I would say would be like 7 to 8, but there are people that call them short sleepers, that they naturally are fine with getting like 5 to 6 hours to sleep. So somebody in this room, I don't know what the statistic is. I don't know if it's like 5 or 10%, but somebody in this room could be a short sleeper. So if you feel you get the 5, 6 hours and you don't need to have like 5 or 6 cups of coffee and you can operate fine, you could be a short sleeper, and you don't need to worry about that.
What's your recommendation for, you said that you have like a protocol for jet lag?
Yes, yes,
I'd love to hear what it is.
sure. And it is actually on my website as well, but it's doing two things. It's combining using melatonin and eating schedule and light schedule. And it depends like where you're going. But you actually want, I'm gonna mess it up. So maybe you could have on my website, but I'll kind of like describe it. So a few days before where you're going. So let me think. Okay. So if say you're going to Israel or you're going to Europe, you want to start by each night you'll take about like maybe like half or like quarter of a milligram of melatonin. Start like maybe 2 or 3 days before. And so like the first night you'll go to bed, regular time, right? And you take the melatonin like right before bed. Then the next night you'll still go to bed at the same time. You take the melatonin a little bit earlier. And so progressively earlier. And then basically once you arrive at your destination, you'll take a full dose of like typically usually a 3. I prefer doing like extended release, like once you land. And so doing the extended release for anywhere from 2 to 3 nights, and that can like help. So that's like the melatonin part. Now the other part is eating. So again, it depends sort of, my brain's like not fully functional, but it depends on the hour. So like the idea is like, so for example, if I'm thinking about like Europe, for example, the idea would be that you would have your quote unquote like dinner like the day of that like the flight, having that like at like 4, like having it at 4, and then like actually fasting for the whole flight. The other thing you would also want to try to do is at least like mimic sleep by like refraining from like watching the TV or whatever on the flight, and like kind of, and then basically then having making sure you have like a breakfast, and it can work also like
Like having dinner early and that's it.
right. And so don't eat anything until the breakfast time of your destination. So there's this, I actually did not make up this protocol. It's called like the Argon protocol, and they actually developed it for pilots actually that were doing.
I was like, pilots, flight attendants.
Yeah, so there's
a lot.
So a lot of it has to do with like the way, food. So it's like food, melatonin, and also the other important thing is like as soon as you get to your destination. I mean, again, obviously it depends. Like, most of the time when we go to Europe, when we go to Israel, at least from my experience, usually it's like the morning, typically. Depends. So like that, like making sure to get sun as soon as possible, and like ideally you don't want to nap, and like you kind of want to just power through that one day, and then
Like without sleep.
yeah, ideally.
I actually was gonna ask you about sunlight. Now we're in winter
Yes,
in New York
yes.
in a
There's a
freezing
lot of-
cold weather. Today was a heat winter. How come?
Yeah, actually it was quite nice. I was actually surprised.
It was like 5 minutes and then it was free.
I know, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
how can we make that a priority? Like, if I were to sit by a window, is it going through the glass? Is that enough? Is that?
Right. So one of the best ways, like unfortunately, and also like sometimes like it's like logistic things. I was even thinking about like my own stuff. Like, am I even able to like leave the house by that time? Like with all the things I have to do, whatever. So like one of the hacks would be getting full spectrum light bulbs. I mean, you could get like a light box. So that's going to be a little bit more of an investment, but like a full spectrum light bulb is only going to run, which you want at certain times. Yeah. Right. I mean, you could have it throughout the day, but yeah, so it can help with affective disorder. Yeah.
Right. Is that an issue for the night?
No, you don't want it.
The full spectrum.
The SAD.
The season, I guess.
Interval seasonal depression.
Yeah.
I mean, even these lights are going to be affecting us. Like if you had this and then this is, locking our melatonin right now. But like definitely as far as like utilizing the benefits during the day, like in the colder season is a good idea to have the full spectrum light bulbs. And you don't have to put them throughout the house, but again, they're not that expensive. You can either put them in certain parts of the room, parts of your place.
I also wanted to ask you about breathing at night. When colds are happening. Do you know anything about our breathing and how it affects our ability to get restful sleep?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, obviously, a condition like sleep apnea, that's going to be affecting one's ability to sleep because what's happening is the deprivation of oxygen and they wake up and everything like that.
Yeah.
So are you talking about when you're stuffed up and having difficulty, or the sleep of that you're bringing in more germs, or?
I meant more like stuffed up. Like I feel like the sleep is just not as quality.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely going to have an impact.
Yeah.
So then the big thing is kind of like what to do with the congestion.
There's a netting pot.
Yeah.
Kids usually don't. I don't know if kids are comfortable things. I won't go for adults.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Stress, sleep. Okay. Yay, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
And it worked out.
It did.
It worked out. It worked out. I can't
We
believe
did
it.
a stress. There you go.
Yeah. We
Um,
went with it.
If you're open to it, we take a selfie with our speaker.
Sure.
Are you up for that?
Yeah.
No. I'm just gonna turn that way. Whoever's on whichever side over there. Okay, there we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much for everyone who came, and also I want to give a big thank you to our sponsor for tonight. It's an anonymous sponsor. It is supposed that every Yid should be healthy and strong, so everyone can take that rock up for themselves and for their loved ones, and may we only hear good news.
Did you say happy birthday to everyone?
Happy birthday to everyone. Yes, thank you for reminding me.
And I should be speaking in a few
Yes,
months,
yes.
most likely on hormones, but if anyone has a different health topic, you can reach out to Michal and maybe I'll do that instead. So if there's something, if there's something that really interests you in the natural health world or just in the health world in general, I'm happy to present.